In Season 2 of Black Clover Mobile, we got all of these new skill pages, but the real question is, how good are they all? Well, let's find out. Alright, so we have all of these skill pages to rank in all of these tiers right here, but if you did watch my latest skill page tier list, then you would know that it looks something like this, as this is the tier list I did in my last video. But the real question is, have any of these skill pages actually gone any better or any worse, or have my opinions on some of them actually just changed? Alright, so starting off with the D tier, I'm actually going to go ahead and bump up the Silent Stone skill page all the way from D tier all the way up to straight up into the C tier, as for me, like, my main goal when using a debuffing character is to actually use and land debuffs on them, or actually make their debuffs more potent, or apply different debuffs, which is why I put in the D tier, as it only increases your defense by 30% and your endurance by another 10%. But I think as we get a lot more harder PvE content, I think Silent Stone will actually be somewhat useful, which is why I'm going to put it in the C tier, and it might even go further up to the B tier for now, but I think C tier is good enough for now. And then we have Insincere Man. This is all the way in the C tier, and I'm actually going to bring it all the way up to the B tier now, as I think with the release of Kyato and Kyato liking how he likes having a bunch of different buffs, is actually going to make this skill page somewhat actually useful, but only really necessarily on characters like Kyato who really scale off of having a lot of different buffs, which is why it's going to go all the way up into the B tier now. And then for other skill pages in the B tier, I'm going to go ahead and buff Breath of Earth all the way up into the A tier, as I think with the release of characters like Noel, I think a lot of people are also using Rados a lot more now as well. I think getting barriers off is going to be a lot easier, as basically what the skill page does is give you a 12% damage increase when you have a barrier, which then once you get all the way up to level 6 can then be increased all the way to a 24% increased damage dealt bonus, which is going to be really helpful, which is going to make it go all the way into the A tier. And then for other skill pages, I'm probably going to actually go ahead and buff up Alec all the way to the C tier as well, because at least it does something, and it actually kind of has a potential usage, because it does give you an attack increase buff whenever you use your special skill, so you actually have a use for it. Alright, so that is everything to do with the current list now, so now it's onto the new skill pages. And starting off with our first skill page is going to be Kyato's skill page, which is called Dance of Determination, and will have a 40% chance to attack after granting a 20% increased crit damage buff. Now essentially what this is just a worse version of Chief's Appearance, as Chief's Appearance is just at least a guaranteed amount of crit damage that you can get, which is why for me it's either going to sit at the very top of B tier or at the very bottom of the A tier. I think because considering our one dupe, it's only a 40% chance of it happening, I think it's going to sit itself at the very just in B tier. It doesn't really matter if it's at the top or bottom or whatnot. And then following that we have Gifso's skill page, or if that's how you say his name, I still don't know how to say it. And his skill page is High Priest's Amusement, and basically what this does on the passive skill will give him extra HP recovery received by 5% and then a 5% increase in max HP. And then with it being an SR skill page, it means it's quite easy for you to dupe out, which means you can get that HP recovery all the way from 5% all the way up to 10% as well, which is always really good. And the main thing for me why this skill page is actually good is because of the actual upgraded skill effect that you can actually give to Gifso on his skill 2, as what this skill will add will be the 70% chance to remove bleed from an ally, but I think this means it will remove it from all allies, as this is an AoE skill, I believe, as in the Hall of Illusions there's going to be a lot of bosses that are going to be really tough, and as well as the actual increased boss damage and stuff like that, I believe bosses like Heath will be able to apply lots of bleed to your allies and stuff, which means being able to cleanse all of those bleeds is going to be really useful as well, which for me is also going to make it land in the B tier for now. So then next up after that we have the Swimsuit Aster skill page, which is going to be Midsummer Training, and the passive skill for this is for every debuff that is removed you will grant yourself 5% of max HP as recovery, and the upgrade skill effect will basically upon removing a debuff you will grant yourself an immortality buff for 1 turn whenever you use the Swimsuit Aster skill 2 as well. And this skill page really does give me the Guide of Despair vibes, as this, just like for this skill page for Veto, this skill page is really only actually ever useful on the Swimsuit Aster, and that's pretty much it, because as far as I'm aware I don't think there's really any other tanks that remove debuffs from themselves except for this Swimsuit Aster, which makes it very niche and just not as good anyway, which is going to go ahead and put this skill page all the way into the C tier, because for me it has a use at least, and it can be used and be useful with the Swimsuit Aster or whatever. Then next up we have the Season 2 Charmy skill page, which is called A Feast at the Beach, and this skill page has the passive skill of being able to grant a 10% reduced damage taken buff, or just flat 10% reduced damage taken permanently if your HP is equal to 90% or higher. And then the upgrade skill will upgrade her skill 2 Shaved Ice, and then it will grant all allies an increased crit resistance level 3 buff for 2 turns as well. And for me this skill page is okay. I really like the upgrade effect of it giving crit resistance to all of your allies with the actual Charmy. I think that's really good, as it will help increase your survivability even more alongside Charmy's own defense buffs that she gives and whatnot. But I think it's also just gonna go alongside Mimosa's skill page in the B tier. And then following that we have Gauche's skill page, the Season 2 Gauche skill page, and this is Angel Statue on the Beach. And what the passive skill of this is, at the start of every wave you have a 20% chance to grant continuous damage immunity for 2 turns, and then if it does not work you'll then get poison immunity for 2 turns instead. And then this will then upgrade his skill 1, Mirror Sunbeam. So then whenever he lands a crit, he'll remove 1 instance of continuous damage from all allies as well. And I'll be honest, I think this is probably one of the worst things I've ever seen in this game in terms of an SSR skill page. This is just really, really bad. As for me personally, the continuous damage immunity is too niche in terms of an actual scenario for you to use it in. And the fact that it's actually on a 20% chance as well just really makes it never ever worth you actually ever using ever, which is why it's going to go straight into the D tier. Alright, and then next up we have an absolute heater, which is going to be Julius Novachrono's skill page, as it's called Pride of the Wizard King, and the passive skill is going to be a 10% increase in all attack bonus, which is honestly amazing as well, because it's going to be giving you guaranteed value, increasing all of your damage as well, which is unbelievably good, meaning it can be used on pretty much any DPS in the game. And not only that, it also makes his skill 2 Distorted Time a way better skill 2 than it normally is without his skill page, as what it will give his skill 2 is the ability to inflict a mobility depletion debuff on the designated target that you select whenever you use his skill 2, which is just amazing for just in general anything in the game, as long as they're not immune to debuffs anyways. And then not only that, he can then also have a 60% chance to inflict a 10% reduced mobility debuff on all enemies except for the designated target that you target when you apply the mobility depletion, which is just also even better as well, because then you can just reduce the mobility of a bunch of different enemies as well in arena, which is amazing. Which for me is honestly going to make it my favorite skill page in the game, just because of everything that he does with just Julius himself and just any DPS character in the game, which is going to make it amazing. It's so good. And then next up we have Kahona's skill page, which is going to be Healing Song, and basically whenever you've been hit by a crit, there is a 35% chance for you to grant all allies 10% of your own max HP as HP recovery, and you can only trigger this 3 times per battle. And then the upgrade for it is going to be on her skill 2, Rhythm Barrier, which will basically allow her skill 2 to do all of the extra things that her skill 2 would normally do, but it also allows her skill 2 to remove 2 debuffs from all allies as well, which is actually really, really good, which for me personally is going to land it all the way into the C tier, as it's very similar to Gauche's in terms of that it's very situational, very niche, but at least in comparison to Gauche's, it actually has a really good upgrade effect. And then we have the Swimsuit Noel skill page. It's going to be the penultimate skill page on this tier list, and it's called Ready for Summer, and the passive of the skill will basically have a 20% chance to grant a barrier equal to 5% of the damage you take for 2 turns whenever you take damage. And then it will also go ahead and upgrade her skill 2, Skill Healing, to have the ability to grant an ally HP recovery equal to 50% of her magic attack if they have an active barrier. And honestly, this is probably one of the worst skill pages in the game, especially SSR skill pages anyway, as once again, just like Gauche's and a lot of other Season 2 characters that have come out, you have a 20% chance for something to happen, and the thing that actually does happen is not very good, because it's only equal to 5% of the damage that you actually take, meaning it's just not very good. But for me personally, I'm really, really not a big fan of this skill page whatsoever. I wouldn't ever see myself using this skill page ever on an attacker. I don't see any usage for it. And then we have this skill page right here, and this is Strawberry Bomb, and basically the passive skill of this is whenever you take critical damage, there's a 30% chance to grant a 30% increased defense buff for 2 turns, which can be increased all the way up to a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns as well once you actually proc it. This skill page is pretty bad, not really good at all. I don't think it's very useful at all. But yeah, that is going to be it for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below whether you agree with my tier list or not, and whether it helped you out or not, and I will see you in the next video. Peace!